All right, listeners, buckle up for this one. We're going deep into some, let's say, controversial territory today. We're looking at this declassified CIA document, and it's all about something called Artichoke. And wow, it is a wild ride.
Yeah, it's like, imagine you find a book, but it's been half-eaten by moths, only this book. Well, it's about Cold War mind control, so you can see why we were interested, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this thing's from the CIA's FOIA website. For anyone who hasn't gone down those rabbit holes, it's the Freedom of Information Act site. So basically, it's where the government releases declassified documents. And this document, well, let me tell you, it's got more redactions than I don't even know.
It's practically a black hole of information.
Right.
Yeah.
But the little snippets we do have, I mean, they're just begging for more explanation.
They really do paint a picture, though, of what the CIA might have been up to back in the early Cold War days.
Okay, so before we get too deep into this,
Yeah.
can you give us some context? What exactly was Artichoke?
Well, Artichoke was a CIA program, and it ran right smack in the middle of, peak Cold War paranoia. You got to imagine, the whole world was on edge. You got the U.S. and the Soviet Union locked in this crazy rivalry, and both sides were terrified that the other side would get the upper hand, especially when it came to espionage. And get this, mind control.
Hold on, mind control. Like, for real, we talking like Manchurian Candidate stuff here.
Well, it wasn't quite like Hollywood, but the CIA was definitely messing around with ways to, influence people's minds. Things like hypnosis, truth serums, even subliminal messaging. These were all the rage in psychology back then. And the CIA, they were trying to turn it all into weapons.
Wow.
So Artichoke was basically America's first step into the world of psychological warfare.
Okay, my mind is officially blown. So if Artichoke was all about mind games and manipulation, what can we even learn from this document? I mean, besides the fact that the CIA loved their redactions.
Well, that's the challenge, isn't it? We got to be like detectives here, piecing together the clues from the little bits and pieces they left us. But even those fragments, they give us a peek into this whole world of shadowy practices and ethical dilemmas that, they're still relevant today.
Okay, I'm game. Let's put on our detective hats then and see what we can figure out. One phrase that really stuck out to me was tapes transcribed but not activated. What do you think that even means?
Oh, that's a curious one, isn't it? It seems like they were recording these interrogations or experiments or whatever. But why wouldn't they activate the tapes? What were they so afraid of?
Maybe the content was just too hot to handle, too incriminating. I mean, we're talking about mind control here.
Yeah, that's possible. Or maybe it wasn't even the content itself. Maybe it was the methods they used. We got to remember, this was a different time. Ethical guidelines, let's just say things were a bit looser back then.
Yeah, that's a good point. It was the Wild West of espionage. Anything went. Another part that really creeped me out was this. It says, subject has intense aversion amounting to hatred. I mean, who is this subject and what do they go through to feel that kind of intense emotion?
It really makes you think about the human cost of these programs. We can't forget. These weren't just abstract experiments. These were real people. And their lives were changed, maybe even damaged by what was done to them.
It's just, I don't know, it's heartbreaking to even think about. It makes you wonder what other stories are hidden behind those black outlines.
Oh, absolutely. Each redaction is like a missing piece of the puzzle, a story left untold. And that's what makes this document so fascinating, but also so disturbing.
Okay, so we've got these hints about secret recordings, a subject filled with hatred. And then there's this phrase, I can't get it out of my head. It says, subject actively contrasts. And then it just cuts off. What do you think they were trying to say there?
Well, if I had to guess, I'd say they were trying to create some kind of internal conflict within the subject, maybe forcing them to question their own beliefs or their loyalties even. This kind of psychological manipulation, it can be incredibly damaging. And it raises some serious ethical questions about how far the government can go.
Yeah, it's easy to get caught up in the whole spy thriller aspect of all this. But these were real people being used in these experiments. It's a reminder that even when it comes to national security, there are lines you just don't cross.
Exactly. And that's what makes this document so important. It forces us to confront some uncomfortable truths about our past and ask ourselves, how far are we willing to go in the name of security?
So we've got snippets about recordings, intense emotions, and psychological manipulation. But how do we even connect these dots? What's the bigger picture here?
That's where things get really interesting. To understand this document, we need to dig into what we know about Artichoke from other sources. Think declassified reports, memoirs from former agents, even congressional hearings. By putting all these sources together, we can start to see what the program was really trying to do and the methods they were using. And that, my friend, is where we'll pick up in part 2. Welcome back, everyone. So we're still trying to figure out this super redacted CIA document all about Artichoke, remember, and what it tells us about the CIA's mind control experiments. During the Cold War, last time we were talking about how even the smallest details, like those unactivated tapes, or the subject's intents, like hatred, can open up a whole can of worms about what went on in those secret programs.
It's crazy how much weight those little fragments carry. It's like each redacted word or phrase is screaming, hey, there's more to this story.
Exactly. And that's why we got it. We can't just look at those fragments on their own. We have to connect them to what we already know about Artichoke from other places.
Okay, so let's play historian for a minute. What do we know about Artichoke's goals and the methods they used?
Well, from what we've been able to piece together from declassified documents and stuff, Artichoke was basically about pushing the limits of human control. They wanted to create agents who could resist interrogation, maybe even program people to carry out missions against their will. Sounds crazy, right?
Like somebody out of a movie.
Yeah, but the threat of Soviet mind control, it was very real to them.
So they were trying to, get ahead of the curve.
Exactly. Fight fire with fire. And to do that, they tried all sorts of techniques, hypnosis, drugs, even sensory deprivation and electroshock therapy. It was a very experimental time. And, well, I think it's safe to say they probably crossed some ethical lines.
Yeah, I bet. I remember reading somewhere that they even experimented with LSD, as a truth serum.
Oh, yeah, that's right. They were really interested in LSD and other psychedelic drugs. They thought they could use them to break down people's resistance or maybe unlock hidden memories. But of course, now we know those experiments were a disaster and they really messed up some people's lives.
It's pretty disturbing to think about what some of those folks went through, all in the name of national security. How do you even measure the psychological damage that was done?
That's a tough question, and it's one that historians and ethicists are still debating today, the long-term effects of these programs. They're hard to figure out, especially because of all the secrecy. But one thing's for sure, they left a dark mark on the history of intelligence operations.
Okay, so they tried hypnosis, drugs, electroshock. Did they ever actually manage to control anyone's mind? Did they create their super spy?
Well, it depends what you mean by success. There's no evidence they ever achieved, the kind of total mind control you see in movies,
Right.
But they definitely made some progress in terms of manipulating behavior and influencing thoughts, which is still pretty freaky.
Yeah, no kidding. When we were talking about that phrase in the document, subject actively contrasts, it made me wonder if maybe they were trying to, induce a split personality.
Interesting.
Create a subject who could act one way consciously, but another way subconsciously.
That's a really interesting interpretation, and it's definitely possible, given what we know about the theories. Of mind control back then, there was a lot of talk about creating those Manchurian candidate types, assassins who could be programmed to carry out these acts without even knowing it.
Wow, that's scary stuff. We're talking about erasing someone's free will, their whole sense of self.
Exactly, and that's why these programs raise such big ethical questions. They make us think about the limits of government power and how important it is to protect individual rights, even in times of crisis.
It's like a slippery slope, right? Once you start justifying these kinds of methods, where do you even draw the line?
Exactly, and that's a debate we're still having today. Think about modern surveillance, drones, data collection, all that. In a lot of ways, we're still dealing with the same ethical dilemmas that were at the heart of Artichoke.
Yeah, good point. It shows that history isn't just in the past, it's still shaping our present.
Absolutely, and by understanding programs like Artichoke, we can better understand the challenges we face today, trying to balance security and freedom in a world that's just getting more and more complex.
So we've talked about the historical context, the methods they used in Artichoke, and some of the ethical stuff. But how does all of this connect? Back to the document we're looking at, what can we really learn from these redacted fragments?
Well, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And it's one we're going to keep exploring. In our final part, we're going to dive even deeper into specific passages from the document, analyze the language, and try to read between the lines to see what they tell us about the true nature of Artichoke and how it affected the people involved.
All right, so we're back. And it's time to finally crack this Artichoke case wide open.
Yeah, we've laid out all the pieces. Now we got to see if they fit.
Exactly. And there's one piece I just can't shake. That line about the unactivated tapes, it's so weird, right? Why even bother transcribing them if they weren't going to listen to them?
Well, maybe the transcriptions themselves were too sensitive. Even just reading the words could be too revealing.
Yeah, there's something about how those interrogations went down. Something beyond just what was said.
Right, and I think it shows how much secrecy surrounded these programs. Remember, back then, the public had no idea what was going on behind closed doors.
Yeah, it makes you wonder how much we still don't know.
Oh, for sure.
Okay, so we've got these unactivated tapes, this hint of hidden method. And then there's another phrase. It says subject's behavior pattern characterized by. And then boom, redacted.
What do you think they were getting at there?
I don't know.
Well, it sounds like they were trying to categorize the subject's behavior, maybe looking for patterns, how they reacted to different things.
So they weren't just trying to get information. They were trying to, predict how the subject would act.
Right, exactly. Remember, one of the goals of Artichoke was to find ways to control behavior, make people act in predictable ways.
So basically, they were trying to program people.
In a way, yeah, they wanted to turn human beings into tools, which is, pretty messed up.
Yeah, no kidding. Reading through this document, it's strange. The language is so dry and bureaucratic, but what they're describing, it's just horrifying.
It's like they were trying to use language to cover up what was really going on?
Yeah, sanitize it.
Exactly.
Make it sound scientific and objective. But at the end of the day, they were experimenting on people.
And that's never going to be clean or simple.
So after all this, what do you think this Artichoke document really tells us? About the CIA, about the Cold War, about ourselves?
Well, I think it shows us that power can be abused, even in a democracy, and that secrets can be kept, and that individuals can be sacrificed, all in the name of national security.
That's a sobering thought. And for our listeners, I hope this deep dive has, made you curious about all the hidden parts of history.
Yeah, keep digging, keep asking questions, don't take anything for granted.
That's all the time we had for today's deep dive. Thanks for joining us as we explored the world of Artichoke. Until next time, stay curious.